Growing up, church was the place where I felt like I belonged. It was the building that held the people, the true church. Those people, the church, they looked and acted like Jesus. They were the people in my life who loved me with the heart of God. I was accepted and valued by the church. And because of that, there was no need for me to run to the world for acceptance or belonging. The church provided a safe place for me, and it was there that I found security. This is where I began to grow a longing to be connected to the body for spiritual growth, and where I began to be committed to the body for loving and serving one another. Growing up, when the doors were open, we were there. We were there for fellowship and for the gift of community. We were there to encounter Jesus and his love for us. And now I have the privilege of watching my littles grow and watching their love for the church, the body of Christ. I get to watch that bloom within them. I've watched them grow a desire to show up when the doors are open, to attend services and special events and summer camps. Why? It's because they're seen here. They're welcomed with open arms here. They know they belong and that they're loved here. They're surrounded by heroes of faith who genuinely care about their spiritual formation. This is the place where Mr. Justin gets the boys amped up and excited about Jesus and grape ice cream or Little Debbie cakes. And it's the place where Miss Penny and Mr. David, where they go out of their way every Sunday. They go the extra mile to love them and to minister to them and to meet their needs. It's the place where Gabby, my Gabby, who's almost 13, it's where she belongs. It's where the spiritual giants in her life, like Michaela and Mallory, at the age of 17 and 18 years old, where they take her by the hand and by the heart, and they lead her to the loving arms of Jesus, reminding her that no matter what she faces in life, he will be her constant. The church is where each one of them are loved all the way to Jesus. And this is an answer to the prayer of my heart, that godly community would surround them and that they themselves would grow a passion and a longing to remain connected to the church. This is our village. This is our tribe, our faith family. And this is where they will tangibly encounter the loving arms of Jesus while learning to believe in him and become like him and boldly proclaim him to the world, all alongside of loving, nurturing, faith-filled passion sharers and fire carriers.
Wasn't that so good? Hey, Mr. Mike here with a summary video of Chapter 2 of the book Resilient, 2050 and the Fearless Future of Faith. I need to warn you that the first 4 chapters of this book are very heavy. Please commit with me now to follow through to the very end of this book. I don't want to leave you in a bad place. Ugly truth can be depressing, but we serve a mighty God, and I promise you we will get to the good stuff. And with your help, we will formulate an effective battle plan. But the first step is to identify what we are facing. Now ask yourself, in the time since you were a child till now, has the climate of the general culture grown more supportive of Christianity or less supportive? It's definitely less supportive, and all indications point to it getting even worse. By 2050, it'll be much worse. Speaking of cultural climate changes, there have been 3 seismic shifts in the culture. The first seismic shift has been technology. Technology has sped up the velocity of secular culture. There is a noticeable decline in well-being. There is a rise in addictive behavior among adults and adolescents. Yes, technology has brought us many advances, and change nearly every area of our lives, from how we learn, how we travel, how we relate to each other. Yes, it saves us time and it has increased our productivity, but it has also come at a cost that we are just now really beginning to understand. As children use mobile technology, scientific research is beginning to tell us that the screens are changing how the brain functions in ways we haven't seen before. We now know that kids' screen usage puts the brain on pause developmentally. Here are some reported average screen times. Children 0 to 8 years old, 15 minutes a day. 8 to 12-year-olds, 6 hours a day. Teenagers, 9 hours a day. Let's compare that screen time with church time. Using those figures for an average 10-year-old, actual church attendance averages about twice a month for an hour or two, so I'll be generous and say 4 hours a month. That's only 48 hours in church a year, compared to 2,160 hours of screen time per year. So let's admit it. Our kids are becoming screen disciples. Should we be concerned about this? A study by the Cincinnati Children's Research Group reports it is clear that children who have too much screen time have deficits in areas like language, imagination, and emotion. We know the years from 3 to 5 represent the formative stage of development for our brains. Too much screen time is a setup for atrophy or underdevelopment of the higher order brain networks. It's harder for kids with underdeveloped networks to learn. Not only is technology compromising our brain formation and occupying large portions of our time, it's also suspected of being the primary driver in the deterioration of our mental health. Teens whose lives are dominated by mobile technology, playing video games, texting, using social media, are experiencing an alarming decrease in emotional well-being compared to their less media-engaged peers. In a study charting well-being among American adolescents, measuring self-esteem, life satisfaction, and happiness, the psychologists discovered a significant decline in well-being since 2012. During that same time period, they observed the increased use of smartphones by teenagers. They found that teenagers who spend more time engaged in screen activities like social media, internet, texting, registered lower levels of psychological well-being. On the other hand, teenagers who limited smartphone use and engaged in more off-screen activities such as in-person social interaction, sports, exercise, and church activities, they registered higher psychological well-being. The world of sin that was once out there, that followers of Christ practice separation from, movies, smoking, drinking, drugs, has returned with a vengeance right into the palm of our kids' hands. Pornography, explicit music lyrics, X-rated violent movies, extreme materialism, sexting, and a worldview that is the exact opposite of and opposed to all things Christian are being funneled right into our kids' minds. And where are mom and dad? You guessed it. They are absorbed with their own screens. A 2018 Nielsen audience report found that adults are now spending more than 11 hours a day on media. Added up, adults will spend 11 years of their lives involved with a cell phone. 11 years in which they were not available to the children who were physically present in their lives. There's a word that describes our relationship to the screen. That word is addiction. To summarize, today's kids are becoming screen disciples through secular venues like YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, and other media messaging. A strong, secular-driven culture is ever present in their lives. It's addictive and more readily available than their own mom and dad. That's where they go for advice, decide what to think, how to behave, what to wear. That's where they go for relationships. Let's face it, kids have become screen disciples. The second seismic shift affecting kids has been the breakdown of family structure. Unfortunately for many Americans, the intact forever family is a fairy tale from a bygone age. Approximately 50% of kids will witness the breakup of their parents' marriage. There is a fatherless epidemic. 20 million American kids are experiencing fatherlessness right now. What has family breakdown done to the values of the current generation of kids? Created insecurity. Gen Z, anyone born since 1996, was polled and asked what matters most. They said achievement measured by financial success matters most. The only way they feel secure is having enough money. That means family is no longer their security blanket. The Gen Z generation is primarily influenced by their peers and by their screen. And how can we sync that reality with the studies that say parents are the child's primary influence in spiritual formation? Traditionally, kids' ministry programs have counted on parental engagement. Parental involvement has been core to the ministry. We know children grow in the soil of their parents' faith. However, we are assuming that children have engaged and available parents in their lives. And unfortunately, the breakdown of the American family, the national epidemic of missing fathers and single mothering is the new norm. Are we tone deaf to the surrounding culture? Are we forgetting the realities of broken families sitting right in our church and living in our communities? Are we effectively training and equipping parents to be able to disciple their own children? How can today's parents be the primary builders of their children's spiritual formation if the parents aren't discipled? If today's children cannot be made disciples by their parents, who then? To summarize, the church needs to stand in the gap, both as the belonging family and the primary disciplers for a generation of kids whose parents are missing or unable to nurture them spiritually. I think the church needs to be discipling the parents also. So how are we doing? The third seismic shift is the decline of the church. Church closures are on the rise. Every week, 100 to 200 churches close. On average, 5,000 churches close every year. But even more alarming is the answer to this question. Are we losing our kids? According to estimates from Barna Group, 64% of our kids will drop out of church. Some would say we have lost a generation. Some would say the church is dying. To be fair, other studies show that of those kids who leave church and college, nearly 2/3 return once they have children of their own. But by then, they themselves have years of not being discipled. Data shows that church children are attending church only 1.7 times a month, and at an hour per service, that equals only 24 hours in church per year. And there is a stark contrast between the hours at church and the thousands of hours they spend in worldly culture. An hour a week in church is simply not going to cut it. To summarize, the greatest challenge to the future of faith is discipleship of our children. What is the future of faith in America? Is the church on its way out? What about the kids who have opted out? Are our kids running in anticipation to church, or are they running to the world? When did the joy of belonging at church fade? Will we realize too late that we gave them things that didn't travel into their adult lives? Are we giving them spiritual entertainment or real spiritual power and purpose? We have fierce competition for the souls of these kids. All around the world, children are being recruited for radical causes, the passions of a crooked and perverse generation. There's an intense battle for the heart of our child. The CEO of Awana said Muslims in Africa are building mosques and schools with Middle East oil money. There, any child can get a free education. They just need to attend the mosque and they can attend school for free. So even Christian parents are finding it hard to walk away from the offer of free education. That's how they're recruiting for the future. They're starting with the very young, small children. The strategy is alarming, but working effectively. And we need our own global child discipleship strategy. We can start by recognizing all these challenges. If these challenges are a problem for us today, imagine what will happen if they're ignored. Imagine what enormous issues there will be in our kids' future. The year 2050 is closer than we think. Yes, we should hold our children very close today, but we must also do everything possible to prepare him or her for that day when they let go of our hands and step into the future as tomorrow's resilient disciples. They need to become the fearless leaders of the church. And they need to become the influencers of the culture. With God, these challenges become opportunities. Opportunities to examine if we are preparing today's kids to become the resilient remnant for tomorrow's church. Will they have the kind of spiritual strength to engage the culture? Will they be able to stand firm on biblical truth? Or will they break against the weight of the culture? Will they be silenced? Will they be driven underground? Will they be Christians in name only but blend into the culture? It is time for an awakening of the faith in America. We believe a renewal can start right in the children's wing of our church. It can begin in your heart. So let's come together. Yes, challenges are ahead of us. Yes, the church at large is struggling. Yes, many families are broken, and yes, the screen is a powerful disciple maker. Each of these things are real challenges. So you and I must be vigilant. John 16:33 says, I have told you these things so that you may have peace in this world. You will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Essential questions. Will our children continue to run to the church? What's the impact of a passive church in the midst of an active culture? Is there hope for the future of the church? Where do Christian families need to draw boundaries? Now, I've asked many tough questions, and they need answered. Your involvement is critical. Please join the rest of our committed church family soon for discussion and training. Grace, peace, and mercy to you all.